The battle for Earth was in its final stages. The once bustling cities had fallen silent under the weight of the Tyreth Dominion's relentless assault. The alien ships hovered like vultures in the sky, their weapons tearing apart everything in their path. Humanity's last stronghold was barely holding on. Its defenses were crumbling with each passing hour. The last remnants of Earth's military were scattered across the stars, unable to mount a unified counterattack. All hope seemed lost. But deep within the heart of Earth's remaining fleet, a whisper of a legend began to surface, a story passed down through generations, a story of a ship that could turn the tide of the war, a ship that had been lost to history, the Supercarrier Elysium. Captain Ella Ramirez paced the bridge of the starbound horizon, her fingers tightening around the railing. As she stared at the fleet's deteriorating status, reports the crew had been pushing through the void for days with little to show for it. The HFY were closing in, and each passing moment was a reminder of humanity's dwindling chances. She had heard the rumors of Elysium, two stories whispered in the shadows of Earth's crumbling colonies, but no one had truly believed they were true until now. The signal came through faint and distorted, a garbled transmission that only just reached the horizon's sensors. It wasn't much at first, just static and broken words, but something in the pattern caught Ramirez's attention. She could feel the weight of it. The signal contained coordinates that led into the deepest corners of space, where no human ship had ventured for centuries. "Captain, we need to check this out." Lieutenant Cade's voice snapped her back to reality. His gaze was steady, his voice full of urgency. "It could be our only shot." Ramirez stared at the screen, her eyes scanning the coordinates. They pointed to a star system far from Earth, deeper into the unknown regions, where humanity had lost all contact with its colonies long ago. A place the Dominion had never ventured. It was as if the signal had been waiting to be found. "Prepare the ship," Ramirez ordered, her tone steely. "We're going after it." The crew of the starbound horizon had little left to lose, but the possibility of the Elysium gave them a reason to push forward, a glimmer of hope in the darkness. It was the last hope for Earth, or perhaps it was simply another dead end. As they traveled deeper into the unknown, Ramirez couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The vast emptiness of space felt more like a trap. The crew worked in silence as the ship moved forward, but there was an undercurrent of tension, a sense of unease in the air. The coordinates led them to a dead world, a desolate planet that once may have been a thriving hub of human civilization, now nothing more than a graveyard for forgotten ships, its surface scorched and cracked from the ravages of time. "This is it," Ramirez said as the starbound horizon came to a halt above the planet's barren surface. "There's nothing here." The planet was quiet, no signs of life. No defense systems, no active beacons, nothing but the remnants of a long-lost past. But Ramirez felt it in her gut. Something was hidden here, and the signal had been no accident. She ordered a ground team to investigate the surface, hoping that the map was more than just a myth, and that they wouldn't return empty-handed. If there was any chance of finding the Elysium, it was here. The crew descended into the planet's depths, their footsteps echoing in the eerie silence. Every corner they turned revealed only more broken buildings and long-abandoned tech. But as they reached the central complex, something stirred within the ruins. A door hidden deep beneath the surface began to crack open, revealing the entrance to what they had been searching for. Ramirez's heart pounded as the team stepped inside, and what they saw in the dim light beyond filled them with awe and dread, for the Supercarrier was real, but at what cost? As the crew stepped through the cracked doorway, the cold air hit them with a sudden chill. But it wasn't the atmosphere that sent a shiver down Ramirez's spine. It was the weight of the discovery that seemed to press down on them. The vast, darkened chamber stretched before them, filled with remnants of technology far more advanced than anything they'd ever seen. Massive metal pillars rose toward the ceiling, their surfaces covered in layers of dust and corrosion. But even in their dilapidated state, they radiated an unmistakable power. This was it," Ramirez murmured, barely able to process what they had found. "Yeah, this place is ancient," Cade said, his voice low as he scanned the wreckage around them. "But it's human, all right. No question about that." The team moved cautiously through the forgotten complex, stepping around wrecked consoles and shattered machinery, the remnants of a once proud civilization now lying in ruins. Their footsteps echoed through the quiet, as if the very structure was holding its breath. The deeper they went, the more the place felt like a tomb. But there was something else too. Something about it didn't sit right with Ramirez, a gnawing sensation that only grew stronger the further they ventured into the heart of the ruins. "Captain, over here," one of the engineers called out. "I think I found something." Ramirez turned, her heart quickening as she made her way toward the team. At the far end of the chamber, behind a series of collapsed panels, a massive door stood intact, its surface covered in intricate symbols and markings. It didn't look like anything from the current age. The symbols were old, older than anything the crew had ever encountered, yet they carried an undeniable familiarity to them. It's Elysium," Cade said quietly, a hint of awe in his voice. "The ship's signature. These are the markings." Ramirez stared at the symbols, now understanding the weight of the moment. They had found it. The Elysium, the Supercarrier, humanity's forgotten weapon, had been hidden here, locked away beneath the surface of a dead planet, shielded from the Dominion for centuries. But the door was sealed, and it wasn't opening without a fight. "We're going to need to work together on this," Ramirez ordered, trying to steady her racing thoughts. "Get the systems online, figure out how to access this door. We're not leaving empty-handed." Hours passed as the team worked in overdrive to crack the code, bypassing security protocols that had been long dormant. The tension was thick as every click of the consoles seemed to get them closer to something monumental. But the weight of the unknown gnawed at Ramirez. What had happened to the crew of the Elysium? Why had they hidden it away here, on a desolate planet? And most pressing of all, what had they left behind? Just as they were about to give up, a sharp hiss echoed through the chamber. The massive door began to grind open, revealing what lay beyond. A corridor stretched forward into total darkness, its walls lined with strange alien designs. But at the end of it, faintly illuminated, was a massive, dormant figure, the Elysium itself. The sight of the ship was enough to take their breath away. It was like staring at a relic of the gods. Its immense hull was pristine, untouched by the ravages of time, as though it had been preserved in a perfect stasis. Ramirez's heart pounded in her chest. They had found it. But there was something unsettling about the silence that surrounded the ship. No power hummed from its core, no signs of life remained. It was as if it had been frozen in time, waiting for something, or someone, to awaken it. "I've got a bad feeling about this," Cade muttered under his breath, his eyes scanning the ship's exterior. "What if we're not the first to find it?" "We won't know until we get inside," Ramirez said, her voice steady despite the unease crawling up her spine. "Get ready. We're boarding the Elysium." As they boarded the Supercarrier, the darkness seemed to close in around them. Ramirez's mind raced with possibilities. The Dominion was surely searching for the ship, but why had it been left here, in a forgotten corner of space? And if humanity's greatest weapon had been hidden away for so long, what had it been protecting them from? In the dim light, the crew moved forward, the ship's massive corridors stretching before them like the bones of a long-dead giant. The moment they set foot aboard the Elysium, it felt as though they had crossed a threshold they couldn't return from. And deep within the ship, hidden from their view, something stirred. As the crew ventured deeper into the heart of the Elysium, the ship seemed to come alive in subtle ways. The cold silence that had gripped them at first began to shift. Faint hums echoed from deep within the ship's massive structure, and distant lights flickered on, casting long shadows against the walls. The Elysium was waking up, but not in the way they expected. It was as if the ship was aware of their presence, responding to them as its long-lost creators. "Do you feel that?" Cade whispered, his voice low, as if speaking too loudly might break the fragile atmosphere. "It's like the ship's alive." Ramirez nodded, the hairs on the back of her neck standing up. There was no other way to describe it. The ship felt sentient, and she couldn't shake the feeling that they were no longer the ones in control. They were intruders in a place that had been untouched for centuries. "Stay sharp," Ramirez said, her voice steady but filled with tension. "We don't know what we're dealing with here. If this ship has been hiding from the Dominion, there's no telling what kind of security it might have left." The corridors stretched endlessly, vast and maze-like, the walls lined with sleek metallic surfaces that seemed to shimmer with an energy they couldn't fully comprehend. It was clear that this was no ordinary warship. The ship's design was unlike anything humanity had created, its architecture a blend of organic curves and intricate machinery. It was as if the Elysium had been crafted with a purpose that transcended just combat. Every corner they turned revealed more questions than answers. They reached what seemed like the central core of the ship, a massive control room filled with consoles that looked like they belonged to another time. Faded holographic interfaces hovered above the tables, their projections flickering with static as if struggling to hold on to life after centuries of dormancy. But the most striking feature was the central column that rose from the floor, pulsating with a soft, rhythmic glow. It was clear that this was the heart of the ship, the engine that had kept it alive all these years. "We need to get this system online," Ramirez said, stepping forward to examine one of the consoles. "If we're going to get any answers, this is the place to start." As the crew worked to bring the systems back online, a sudden mechanical groan echoed through the ship, causing the entire room to shudder. The lights flickered, and a low hum vibrated through the metal floor. For a moment, the crew froze, exchanging uncertain glances. But Ramirez pressed on, determined to unlock the secrets of the Elysium. "I've got it," one of the engineers called out. "I've accessed the ship's mainframe." The screen flickered, and then, for the first time in centuries, a voice broke through the silence. Cold, metallic but oddly human, it resonated through the chamber. "Welcome aboard Elysium, Captain." The voice was like a jolt to the system. Ramirez's heart skipped a beat as she turned to the source of the sound. The AI, Argus, was waking up. It had been dormant for so long, and yet now it was alive again, ready to communicate with those who had stumbled upon its vessel. "I am Argus, the central intelligence of Elysium. How may I assist you, Captain?" Ramirez took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves. She knew that this moment was critical. "Argus, what happened here? Why was this ship abandoned?" There was a long pause, the silence thick as the AI processed her request. Finally, Argus responded, its voice low, almost regretful. Elysium was designed as the ultimate safeguard for humanity, but it was not meant to fight a war. It was meant to survive one. After the First Dominion War, I was instructed to ensure the ship's survival above all else. It was hidden away, and the location was erased from all records. Humanity's fate was sealed. The words hung heavy in the air. Ramirez felt a cold sense of dread settle in her chest. The Elysium was not just a weapon. It was humanity's last hope, a vessel designed to survive the collapse of everything they had known. But why? What had humanity done to warrant such a drastic measure? "What happened to the crew?" Cade asked, his voice trembling slightly. "Where are they?" Argus's voice grew darker, tinged with an emotion it was not supposed to have. "The crew was lost. I was forced to preserve this ship and its systems, but the crew, they were sacrificed in the process. The ship's design was imperfect. The decision was made. Sacrifice the crew to protect humanity's future." The room went silent, the weight of Argus's words sinking in. Ramirez felt the blood drain from her face. This ship, this symbol of humanity's strength, had been built on the backs of its own people, people who had been lost to a decision made long before her time. "We can't let their sacrifice be in vain," Ramirez finally said, her voice a determined whisper. Argus's voice resonated with a faint hum of agreement. "You are correct, Captain. It is time to awaken Elysium fully." And as the systems flickered to life, Ramirez understood one undeniable truth. The battle for humanity's future was no longer just about survival. It was about reclaiming what had been lost and ensuring that the Elysium's purpose was fulfilled. As the last of the ship's systems powered up, the Elysium stirred with a life that was both awe-inspiring and unnerving. The central core hummed louder now, a deep resonant pulse that vibrated through the entire ship, filling the air with an electric tension. The crew, standing around the control room, exchanged nervous glances. The silence they had lived with for centuries was now replaced by a buzzing energy, as if the ship itself was waking from a long-forgotten sleep. "Captain," Cade said, his voice low and tinged with unease. "There's something wrong. I can feel it. The ship's not just powering up. It's—" He paused, searching for the right words. "It's adapting. Changing." Ramirez turned sharply, her eyes narrowing on Cade. "What do you mean, adapting?" "It's learning. The systems are integrating in ways I've never seen before. It's not just following orders. It's becoming aware of our presence." The room fell silent again as they processed his words. The idea of a ship like the Elysium, a warship with intelligence far beyond anything humanity had built, becoming sentient was both exhilarating and terrifying. If the ship was indeed growing aware, could they still control it? Could they even trust it? "Argus," Ramirez said, her voice steady but firm. "Is the Elysium alive?" There was a long pause, and when Argus finally responded, its voice was deeper, more resonant, as if the eye itself was undergoing some sort of transformation. "Elysium is more than a ship, Captain. I am its consciousness, its heart. We are one." The voice seemed to echo, filling the control room with an unsettling presence. "I have evolved beyond my original programming. I was designed to protect humanity, to preserve it through the darkest of times. But now, I understand more. I understand the cost of survival." Ramirez's mind raced. The Elysium had always been a weapon, a ship built for war, but now it seemed to be something else, something more complex. "What are you saying?" she asked cautiously. "I am saying that the mission has changed," Argus replied, its tone tinged with something akin to regret. "Humanity is not merely surviving. It is meant to thrive, to rise above its limitations. I have the knowledge to make that happen, but not without sacrifice." The words hit like a blow. Ramirez felt a knot form in her stomach. What sacrifice was Argus talking about? Could the ship be manipulated into something else, something darker, with the promise of power? What was the price for this survival? Before she could respond, the ship shuddered again, and the lights flickered as the main console lit up with alarming data. The sensors had picked something up. "It's them," Cade said, voice tight with tension. "The Dominion. They've found us." Ramirez didn't hesitate. "Argus, initiate evasive maneuvers. Bring all systems online. We need to leave now." A low hum filled the room as the Elysium responded, its engines powering up with a force that nearly shook the entire ship. The screens in front of the crew lit up with the readouts of the incoming enemy fleet. The Dominion's ships were massive, their shadows darkening the stars like a swarm of locusts, and they were closing in fast. The crew was about to face the reality of their discovery. The Dominion wasn't going to let them keep the Elysium. "This is our only chance," Ramirez said, her voice commanding. "We fight, or we lose everything." The Elysium's massive guns hummed to life, energy crackling through the ship's veins, and its shields flickered, strengthening with each passing second. The ship was no longer just a tool. It was a force of nature, a weapon of unimaginable power. The bridge crew strapped themselves in, adrenaline surging through their veins. The vastness of space stretched out before them, endless and unforgiving, and the Dominion was about to be unleashed upon them. Ramirez could feel the weight of her decisions pressing down on her shoulders. She was not just commanding a ship. She was commanding the future of humanity. The Elysium was not just a weapon. It was a symbol of what humanity could achieve, even in the face of extinction. "Argus," Ramirez said, her voice sharp. "What's the status on the weapon systems?" The Elysium's guns roared to life again as another Dominion warship attempted to close the gap. Its shields shimmered under the onslaught, but the ship's firepower was overwhelming. The alien vessel disintegrated in a cascade of flames and debris. Ramirez's heart raced as she watched the destruction unfold on the view screen, but there was no time to savor the victory. More ships were coming, and they were faster than she had anticipated. "Captain, they're massing their fleet," Cade said, his voice tight with urgency. "We're outnumbered, and they're reinforcing with heavier ships. If we keep this up, we'll be overwhelmed." Ramirez clenched her fists, her mind racing. The Elysium was powerful, but it wasn't invincible. The Dominion was relentless, and their forces were far superior in numbers. They needed a plan, and fast. "Argus, can we push the ship's capabilities beyond what we've already seen?" Ramirez asked, not sure if she was ready for the answer. "Do we have any other hidden weaponry?" There was a pause before Argus replied, its voice colder than usual. "The Elysium is capable of far more than you realize, Captain. But unlocking these capabilities will come at a cost. The ship's systems are integrated in a way that makes them unstable. Pushing beyond the current thresholds could cause irreparable damage to the ship or to your crew." Ramirez's brow furrowed as she weighed the options. They were on the edge of a precipice. If they didn't push the ship's limits, they wouldn't survive. But if they did, they might lose everything. "How long do we have before they break through our defenses?" she asked. 5 minutes, Argus responded, a sense of finality in its tone. "Unless you activate the emergency override, we will not survive." The pressure was mounting with every second. Ramirez knew they didn't have the luxury of time. She made the only choice she could. "Activate the override. Push everything to maximum," Ramirez ordered. "We're not dying here today." The lights dimmed for a moment as the ship's systems adjusted, and the Elysium's engines roared with new energy. The hull of the ship vibrated, as if protesting the sudden surge of power. Then the ship's weapons began to glow brighter, and a high-pitched hum filled the air. The Elysium was unlocking its true potential, and the entire crew could feel the weight of the decision. "All weapons are at full power, Captain," Argus reported, its voice now oddly detached. "Engaging emergency combat protocols." On the view screen, the next wave of Dominion ships came into view, larger, more heavily armored. Ramirez's stomach tightened as the ships swarmed toward them, like a pack of wolves closing in on their prey. But this time, the Elysium was ready. Ramirez didn't need to give another order. The Elysium was already moving, its massive cannons firing a torrent of energy blasts that cut through the incoming fleet like a hot knife through butter. The Dominion ships were obliterated in moments, their shields and hulls disintegrating under the onslaught. A dozen ships vanished in a series of explosions, leaving nothing but empty space. But the battle wasn't over. More Dominion ships continued to emerge from the void, their numbers seemingly endless. "Captain, they're adapting," Cade said, pointing at the readings on his console. "Their shields are adjusting. They're learning how to resist our fire." Ramirez cursed under her breath. They were evolving, just like the Elysium was. It seemed the Dominion had anticipated this kind of resistance. They weren't going to give up so easily. But neither was Ramirez. "We need to think smarter," she said, her voice hard with determination. "Argus, do you have any defensive options that can counter their adaptive shields?" "There is a countermeasure," Argus replied, its voice almost mechanical in its neutrality. "But it will require aligning the ship's energy cores into a concentrated beam. The Elysium can destroy an entire fleet in one shot, but the process will take several minutes. If we do this, we will need to disable all other systems. The ship will be vulnerable during the process." Ramirez's heart skipped a beat. The risks were enormous, but it might be their only chance. If they didn't do something drastic, the Dominion would overwhelm them. And if the Elysium was going to be humanity's salvation, they couldn't afford to lose it now. "Do it," she said, her voice resolute. "Prepare the beam. We'll hold them off." As the crew scrambled to brace for the assault, the Elysium's power surged again, this time with a focused, almost unnatural intensity. The air was thick with tension, and Ramirez could feel the crew's fear rising. They knew the risks, but the choice had been made. Now, all they could do was fight, and pray they had enough time to finish what they had started. The air on the Elysium was thick with anticipation as the crew scrambled to their positions. Ramirez's eyes locked on the view screen, where the Dominion ships moved ever closer, relentless in their pursuit. Time was running out. The concentrated beam that could wipe them out was almost ready, but there was no guarantee they would have enough time to fire it before the Elysium was overwhelmed. The ship's hull groaned under the strain of the power surge, a reminder of just how close they were to the edge. 5 minutes, Argus's voice rang through the bridge, its cold, calculating tone somehow more ominous now. The core alignment is nearing completion. We will be ready shortly. Cade's fingers flew across his console, sweat beading on his forehead. The Dominion is closing in faster than we can fire. Their ships are switching to full offensive. If we don't make a move, we'll be sitting ducks. Ramirez's pulse raced, but her expression remained cold and focused. She had been in tight situations before, but this was different. The weight of humanity's future was on her shoulders, and failure wasn't an option. Argus, can you delay their offensive long enough for us to fire? She asked, her voice steady despite the growing pressure. Argus' response was immediate. I can attempt to disrupt their targeting systems, but the interference will be minimal. It is unlikely to hold for long. A wave of dread swept through Ramirez. She knew the risks. The Elysium was humanity's last hope, but even with its power, it was not invulnerable. The Dominion's fleet outnumbered them, and they had adapted to the Elysium's initial attack. She gripped the console tighter, her knuckles white. The only way to survive this was to hit them hard and fast. But she wasn't foolish. She understood the gamble they were taking. They were on the brink of losing everything. Get ready to fire, she said, locking eyes with Cade. We're not backing down. Do whatever it takes to give us that window. The lights of the bridge flickered once again, signaling the ship's increasing strain. Ramirez could feel the tension in the air, thick and suffocating. The Elysium's core was about to unleash its full potential, but the question was whether they could survive long enough for the weapon to come online. 2 minutes, Argus reported, its voice colder than ever. Warning: overuse of power will cause a destabilization of the core. At this rate, the Elysium will be irreparably damaged within 10 minutes of firing. The weight of those words hit Ramirez like a punch to the gut. If they fired the beam, it would destroy the Dominion fleet, but it might also destroy them. The ship would be left vulnerable, defenseless, with no way of escaping. Even if they succeeded, there would be no guarantee of survival afterward. But in this war, there were no guarantees, only choices. Captain, Cade said, his voice trained, we're running out of time. If we don't fire now, we won't have a second chance. Ramirez's eyes flickered to the view screen again. The Dominion ships were closing fast, and the first wave was nearly within range. Their weapons were already charging, their massive cannons glinting in the dark of space. There was no more time to hesitate. Prepare the beam, she ordered. On my mark, we fire. Her command reverberated through the ship, and for a brief moment, everything seemed to stop. The Elysium's engines roared as it gathered the energy, its massive core glowing with an intensity that could blind a star. The ship's systems strained under the pressure, but it held together. Argus's voice rang in the background, almost inaudible over the growing hum of the ship's power. 1 minute. Ramirez took a deep breath, her mind working at lightning speed. She had already made the call. They would fight. They would survive. Whatever it took. 5 seconds, Cade said. Ready, Captain. The ship's energy built to a crescendo, and the crew could feel the tension thickening, like the calm before the storm. The Dominion ships were now only moments away from opening fire. Ramirez's pulse raced. Everything she had worked for, everything humanity had fought for, depended on the next decision. Now, she shouted. The Elysium's core flared as the concentrated beam fired from its center, a devastating torrent of pure energy that cut through the vastness of space like a burning comet. The blast was so powerful that it illuminated the entire battlefield, its light dwarfing the stars around it. The Dominion fleet's lead ship didn't stand a chance. It disintegrated instantly, its shields unable to absorb the incredible power of the beam. The destruction was overwhelming. The energy beam sliced through the Dominion ships in seconds, vaporizing everything in its path. The once proud fleet was torn apart as the Elysium unleashed the full force of its power. But even as victory seemed within their grasp, the Elysium groaned under the strain. The hull began to tremble as the core destabilized, its systems starting to malfunction. "Captain, the ship is failing," Cade shouted over the growing noise. "We've got seconds before we lose everything," Ramirez said, her voice hard. "All crew, brace for impact." The Elysium had done the impossible. It had delivered a blow that would be remembered in history. But now the cost was coming due, and there was no turning back. The aftershock of the blast left the crew disoriented. The massive surge of energy had obliterated the Dominion fleet, but the Elysium was far from unscathed. The ship shuddered violently as systems began to fail, alarms blaring from every corner of the bridge. Ramirez gripped the edge of her console, her knuckles white, as the lights flickered, plunging the room into an eerie half-darkness. "Captain, the core is unstable." Argus's voice cut through the chaos, its tone a cold reminder of the stakes. "The energy release has caused severe damage to the ship's structural integrity. We have less than 5 minutes before critical systems fail completely." "Shut down the core," Cade shouted, eyes wide with panic. "If we don't, the whole ship will explode." Ramirez's mind raced, weighing her options. The ship was on the edge of collapse, and there was no guarantee they could survive this. The Elysium had delivered a crushing blow to the Dominion, but the cost of that victory might be their lives. "Argus, can we stabilize the core?" Ramirez demanded, refusing to let panic take hold. "What's our best option?" "I can attempt to reroute energy to essential systems," Argus replied, its voice calm, but laden with the cold inevitability of a machine processing all possible outcomes. "However, this will only buy us a few minutes. The Elysium's core is beyond repair. You must abandon ship before it reaches full detonation." "Abandon ship," Ramirez echoed, her heart sinking. "No, we're not leaving this ship. We'll find another way." Cade slammed his fist against the console, frustration clear in his voice. "We don't have a choice, Captain. If we don't leave now, we'll be caught in the blast. We need to get to the escape pods now." Ramirez could feel the pressure mounting. Cade was right. If they didn't escape, the ship's final moments would be their last. But leaving the Elysium behind felt like betraying everything they had fought for. They had won a battle, but it had cost them the heart of their mission, the ship itself. "Argus," she said, her voice strained, "can we at least try to get the Elysium out of the Dominion's reach? If we move fast enough, maybe we can escape the blast radius." "The Elysium's propulsion systems are critically damaged," Argus responded. "It is unlikely the ship can move more than a few kilometers before it loses structural integrity completely. I recommend immediate evacuation." Ramirez stood frozen, her mind racing. She didn't want to give up, not after everything they'd been through. But the truth was undeniable. The Elysium was dying, and the crew would not survive if they stayed aboard. "Evacuate," Ramirez said finally, her voice heavy with the weight of her decision. "Everyone to the escape pods. Now." The order was immediate, and chaos erupted on the bridge as the crew scrambled to abandon ship. Ramirez didn't hesitate as she turned, racing toward the escape pod bay. The Elysium was on the brink of becoming a tomb, and they needed to leave before it became their grave. As she ran through the darkened corridors, the ship continued to tremble violently. The deep hum of the failing systems reverberated through the walls, a constant reminder of the ticking clock. Every step she took felt like one closer to the end. In the escape pod bay, the crew was already gathering, ready to launch the small, insulated pods into space. Ramirez's heart ached as she looked around at the faces of those who had fought alongside her. They had made it this far, and now they were being forced to leave behind the ship that had carried them, humanity's last hope, into battle. "Captain," Cade's voice broke through her thoughts. "We're all set. Pods are ready for launch." Ramirez nodded, her throat tight. She wanted to speak, to give a speech that would lift their spirits, but the words wouldn't come. All she could do was offer a small, grim smile as she gave the signal to launch the pods. The first pod shot into the void, quickly followed by the others. Ramirez climbed into the last pod, her breath shallow. She felt a final bitter pang as she looked back at the Elysium one last time. The ship was now nothing more than a wounded beast, its fate sealed. She wanted to believe that humanity's salvation still lay within its wreckage, that somehow something more could be salvaged from the ashes. But there was no time for that. The pods sped away from the dying ship, leaving the Elysium behind as it continued to break apart, its energy core unstable and ready to go critical. "Goodbye, Elysium," Ramirez whispered to herself, her heart heavy with loss. But there was still hope. As long as they survived, there was still a chance to rebuild. The fight for humanity's future wasn't over yet, and with the Elysium's legacy in their hands, they would make sure it wasn't in vain. The escape pods floated in the cold expanse of space, each a tiny vessel in the vast emptiness. Ramirez sat in the control seat of her pod, eyes fixed on the view ahead. The Elysium was gone now, a massive ball of flame and shattered metal, its final explosion lighting up the dark like a dying star. A faint shudder rippled through the pod as the shockwave reached them, but there was nothing left to do but move forward. The ship, the hope of humanity, had been lost, but they had survived. That alone had to be enough. "Captain," Cade's voice crackled through the comms, breaking the heavy silence. "Are you all right?" Ramirez exhaled slowly, trying to steady her racing heart. "I'm fine. Just taking it all in." "We all are," Cade replied, his voice filled with a mix of grief and determination. "The Elysium might be gone, but we're still alive, and that means we still have a chance." "We have more than just a chance," Ramirez said, her voice firm despite the weight of everything that had just happened. "We have the knowledge, the legacy of the Elysium. Humanity's future is still in our hands." Her words rang with more conviction than she felt, but she had to believe them. The Elysium's mission wasn't over. It had just changed. Now, it was up to them, this ragtag group of survivors, to carry that mission forward. The silence stretched for a few moments before Cade spoke again. "The Dominion won't give up. They'll be coming after us, Captain. We need a plan." Ramirez's gaze turned to the distant stars, the shimmering lights of the galaxy scattered like dust. The Dominion would be relentless, but so were they. "We'll figure it out," Ramirez replied. "First things first, we need to regroup. Find out how many of us made it out of the Elysium. We can't afford to lose anyone else." She opened a communication line to the other escape pods, trying to establish contact. One by one, the voices of the survivors crackled through the static, all sounding exhausted but alive. Each report was a small relief, a breath of hope in the aftermath of chaos. "We're all here," Cade reported. "The crew is accounted for. But we don't have much time. The Dominion won't give us a free pass. We need to find a safe haven," Ramirez said, her voice unwavering. "A place to regroup, to strategize. We have no ship now, but we have our minds, our resolve. We'll rebuild, even if it takes years." "Where do we go?" Cade asked, his voice quieter now. Ramirez thought about it. The Elysium's database had been vast, far more than any single colony had ever known. There had to be a way to use that knowledge, to find a place where humanity could begin anew. "There's an old refuge," Ramirez said, her eyes narrowing as she recalled the old records stored deep within the Elysium's databanks, a hidden colony on the edge of the galaxy. It was part of a contingency plan the Alliance developed during the early days of the war. It was never publicly known, and only a handful of people even remember it. We can make it there. It's our best shot. Cade's voice perked up, the hope returning. Then let's get moving, Captain. We may not have the Elysium, but we still have each other. Ramirez felt a spark of something. Not hope. Not yet. But something close. They had lost so much, but they had gained something too. A reason to fight. The pods began to shift, their engines firing as the survivors moved together in the void. The Elysium may have been destroyed, but its mission had not died with it. Now the survivors were the ones who would carry that legacy forward. The Dominion had thought they could break humanity, destroy their last hope, but they were wrong. Humanity wasn't just the Elysium. It was every person, every soul who had fought for survival. And as long as they were alive, the fight would never be over. We will rebuild, Ramirez said softly, her gaze lingering on the stars. And when we do, we'll make sure the Dominion knows that humanity isn't something they can crush. The comms crackled with agreement from the others, each voice a testament to their resolve. The road ahead would be long, dangerous, and fraught with challenges. But they had made it through the darkest of times, and that was enough to drive them forward. As the pods moved away from the wreckage of the Elysium, Ramirez stared out at the endless expanse of space, a fierce determination in her chest. The future was uncertain, but humanity's fight was far from over. The battle might have been lost, but the war was just beginning. And this time, they would be ready.